Hello and welcome back to this extended or part 2 episode of the SASO 6 minus 3 we did the individual episodes on. Thank you so much for coming back this week and joining us. I do not know why I look so upset on this image, but I wasn't going to mull it over for too long. Just a reminder to please subscribe, follow us on socials, hype the videos on your mobile phone. Every little bit helps. And I really appreciate all of you for being here and wanting to learn more and know more about our history. So let's get on with the story. We have my favorite name to say. Let's go. Nefolovhodwe was born on the 2nd of February 1947 in the village Volovhodwe in the northern Transvaal, now Limpopo. His home territory was in the far north of South Africa in the Venda homeland. When Harry Ningwakulu was expelled from Turfloop for his BCM activism, Nefolovhodwe and Abraham Tiro emerged as the campus's new student leadership. When Turo was expelled too, Nefolovhodwe led the subsequent protests and was himself expelled in 1972. He found work as an assistant welfare officer at the Musina copper mine and then as a teacher before being readmitted to Turfloop. By 1974, he had risen through the ranks of the SASO structures to become both the SRC president at Turfloop and the national president of SASO itself. He was 27 years old and leading the organization at its most dangerous moment. When the VIVA FRELIMO rallies were organized, he was central to that effort. When the arrest came in October 1974, he was among those detained. He served 6 years at Robben Island, held in the A section with his BCM comrades. He emerged in 1982 and went directly back to activism, joining a BCM-aligned trade union, the Black Allied Mining and Construction Workers Union. He became the regional organizer for the Limpopo in 1983 and was elected Secretary General in 1984. The pattern was consistent across several of the SASO Nine: release from prison, back to the movement, find a new vehicle, usually a ZAPO or the unions, to continue their work. Nefolovhodwe served as president of ZAPU from 1990 to 1992 and then as deputy president from 1992 to 2010. He was one of the founding members of the National Council of Trade. In the post-apartheid era, he entered formal parliamentary politics, representing ZAPU in the National Assembly from 2002 to 2000. After his parliamentary term, he moved into development work, becoming the director at Isbaya Development Trust, working on cooperative development as part of a village renewal program involving 56 villages in the former Transkei, bringing development resources to rural communities that had historically been most neglected. He also served as a member of the Robben Island Museum Council, contributing to the preservation and interpretation of the history he had lived. Pandelani Nefolovhodwe, I hope I didn't mess up the name, is still alive. He is, of the surviving members of the SASO Nine, one of the most consistent embodiments of what Black consciousness argued from the beginning, that the struggle did not end with political liberation, and that the work of building genuine community dignity was a project requiring sustained commitment across generations. Nkwenkwe Nkomo came to the Black consciousness movement from, of all places, the Scout movement. He joined the Davidton 7th Cub Scout Pack in 1957 when he was about 7 years old, at a time when South Africa had 4 racially separate Scout associations, one for whites, one for coloreds, one for Indians, and one for Black Africans called the Pathfinders. The young Nkomo was already encountering the institutional architecture of apartheid in the most ordinary possible setting, a children's club. He remained in scouting until 1971 when, in his words, the bureaucracy in the movement started getting the better of what we were doing as young boys. By then, his political consciousness was fully formed. He moved into student politics and the BCM movement, becoming a student leader in SASO and then a national organizer for the Black People's Convention. His name, he explained with characteristic likeness, means cowboy in Zulu. Nkwenkwe means little boy and Nkomo means cow. He has always worn a signature fez. He has always spoken 9 South African languages. He says he acquired them through living in the township, not through a formal program. He was arrested in 1974, like the others, charged and convicted, and spent 6 years on Robben Island. He has spoken of those years as running what he called the offshore business with Nelson Mandela, a sardonic phrase that captures the gallows humor of people who refuse to be defined by incarceration, political incarceration. The connections made on that island, he has said, still hold firm. He was released on the 20th of December 1982. He has described it with his characteristic wit as a Christmas gift to the family. And then after everything, he made perhaps the most unexpected career turn of any of the 9. In 1983, Nkomo walked into the offices of an advertising agency called Lindsay Smithers. He had no idea what advertising was about. He joined as a trainee in the creative department and worked there while continuing his community organizing in Daveyton, where he chaired the Daveyton Residents Committee. The committee identified community needs and raised funds for development. The same skills, the same instincts, a different arena. He rose through the advertising industry to become the group deputy chairman of FCB South Africa, at the time South Africa's largest marketing communications group. He became chairperson of the Advertising Standards Authority. He was appointed chairperson of the National Communications Partnership for the 2020 FIFA World Cup hosted in South Africa. And then, completing a circle that is so improbable it sounds like a film, he returned to scouting. He served 2 5-year terms as Chief Scout of South Africa from 1996 to 2005. He was then elected to the World Scouting Committee, the executive body of the World Organization of the Scout Movement, for a 6-year term beginning in 2005. He was only the second South African ever to serve on that committee. He had a way of describing himself that has stayed with me. A chief scout, he said, I am chief servant. That phrase, a politics of service, of community, of building rather than commanding, is really recognizably Black consciousness. He took it into every arena he entered, the courtroom in Pretoria, the prison on the island, the townships of Daveyton, the boardrooms of advertising, and the global movement of young people learning to be citizens of the world. Gilbert Kaborone Sedibe is the hardest of the 9 to trace. He appears in every list of the accused. He sat through the same trial. He was convicted under the same terrorism act, and he served his sentence on Robben Island. Sats Cooper, writing about his time on the island, mentions him by name. He describes Sedibe arriving in B section cell block and the adjustments that followed among the prisoners. Beyond that, the documented public record becomes thin. This is not unusual. Several of the BCM figures who did not seek elected office or prominent public roles after release have left limited archival traces. The historical record has a tendency to follow power and visibility, and many of the people who made significant contributions to the liberation struggle simply went back to their lives, to their communities, and their private work, without generating the kind of documentation that ends up in encyclopedias and history books or documentaries. But we know this. Gilbert was among the original 13 arrested in September and October of 1974, following the FRELIMO rallies. He was one of the 9 against whom the state proceeded to trial. He was convicted. He served his sentence. He was part of the BCM circle on Robben Island. What happens after his release is not well documented in the public sources available to us. I want to say something about this silence because I think it matters. The SASO Nine trial was one of the most important political trials of the apartheid era. Its 9 accused were, at that moment of their arrest, some of the most capable young political organizers in South Africa. The trial was covered extensively in the press. Steve Biko gave testimony on their behalf that was described as a seminar in Black consciousness. And yet, for one of the 9, the trail goes cold almost immediately after release. This is a reminder that history is always partial, that the people who get remembered are not always the most significant or the bravest or the most principled. They are often simply the people who happen to remain visible in arenas where records are kept. Sedibe's absence from the historical record does not diminish his presence in the dock or on the island or in the struggle. It simply tells us something about the incompleteness of the archive. If anybody listening to this episode knows more about his life after Robben Island, we would very much love to hear from you. 6 people, including Zithulele Cindi, who we should not let slip from view here. Born in Alexandra Township in 1950, expelled from school for failing to show a pass to security police at the age of 18, who joined the Black People's Convention when it was founded in 1972, rose to become its Secretary General by the age of 23, was arrested, convicted, served 5 years on Robben Island, came out in December 1981 and went straight back to ASAPO, then to the National Forum, to the Metal and Electrical Workers Union, and eventually to the national chairmanship of ASAPO itself. 7 very different lives after the island. Mokoape, a doctor who fought for his right to practice, won and gave decades of service. Myeza, the man who conceived the rallies that started everything, who died in a suspicious car accident in 1990, months after the world had changed, whose memory ASAPO still commemorates annually. Nefolovhodwe, who moved from student president to trade union secretary general, to parliamentarian to rural development worker, keeping his BCM commitments intact across half a century. Nkomo, who took the skills of Black consciousness into advertising and scouting and served on the governing body of a global youth movement. Debe, whose story for now we cannot fully tell. And Cindi, the BPC's Secretary General, who was at 23, one of the youngest in the dock, and who has spent his life building worker organizations and political structures from the same BCM roots. The state put these 9 young people on trial intending to silence them, to make an example of them, to deter others from the same path they had chosen. The state always miscalculates with people like this because they think that these people are dumb. They are applying their own prejudice to these individuals, and therefore they always tripped up. The trial gave the BCM a platform it could not have bought. Steve Biko's testimony in the Pretoria courtroom in May 1976 turned the proceedings into one of the most sustained public expositions of Black consciousness philosophy that has ever been delivered. Let's not be mistaken, though. Those 9 people paid an enormous price, years of their lives spent in prison, away from their families and their youth, and a disruption of their careers. In each case, the price was paid without surrender. Their names should be known, all 9 of them. 9 names, 9 lives, 1 indictment against a system that could not stand the sight of young Black people who refused to be afraid and who refused to stand down. As we mentioned, this was a very big political case at that stage. What it helped to get the message out there and officially document what this movement was about. What I love about all these individuals that I've found is where they have and where we have found detail. They've never forgotten the root and the heart of that BCM and SASO movement, which was to go back into your communities and give back. I've spoken about this before, how amazing it is that a lot of them didn't forget that political liberation didn't just make everything okay. You had to go into your communities and build them back up. And you might go, well, I don't see the fruits of that labor today. But we're talking about a set of people. There's only so much you can do. As movements were built up around an idea or built up around a fight, massive people have to come together and do what they did in the most frightening of times. And then to continue that work back into the communities, whether it was one or another way, very separated, but the same vein of community assistance and propping people up. And for that, I will always be in awe of the things that they have done and who they are or were as individuals. So thank you so much for joining me this week. I hope you enjoyed. I love telling these people's story. I love everything those that I could. It's really, really cool. The things that they've done and achieved against all odds and against a pressure that we just don't understand. It's not the same. Okay. Thank you. And I'll see you next week with another Springbok Talk. Hopefully not the Jersey, but it's really cold in Cape Town. Okay, thanks. Bye.